Imagine you're sealed inside a cave with a monster the size of a tree. Night falls. It reaches into the dark, grabs two of your friends, and eats them alive right in front of you. And the only door is a boulder that 50 men couldn't move. You can't fight it, it's too strong. You can't run, there's no way out. And killing it in its sleep only seals your tomb, because that's the only thing alive strong enough to roll back the rock, and all you have is something the monster has never needed: a clever mind. What this man did to walk out of that cave alive became the most famous trick in the ancient world, but what he shouted on his way out cost him the next 10 years of his life. Let me tell you this story from the Odyssey. Twelve ships sailed away from Troy. After 10 years of war, 10 years of mud and blood and dead friends, 12 ships full of men were finally going home. By the time our story starts, there was one ship left. Now, I'm not going to tell you the name of the captain just yet. I'm going to hold on to that. I'm keeping it back. It's going to matter more than you think. For now, let's just call him the captain. The cleverest man in the Greek army, the one who dreamed up the wooden horse that ended the war. He'd outsmarted a whole city. Now, he just wanted to outsmart the sea long enough to get his men home. Then they saw an island. Green hills, no smoke, no farms, wild goats wandering down on the shore like they'd never seen a man before. This kind of place feels like a gift. They beached the ship, and that night they ate well for the first time in weeks. In the morning, the captain took 12 of his best men and went up to see who lived there. And what they found was a cave, a huge one, set into the hillside, with pens of lambs and baby goats out front, racks of cheese drying up in the dark, pails of milk and whey lined up along the walls. Somebody lived there very well. The men looked up at all that food and they whispered the smart thing, the safe thing. Grab the cheeses, drive off a few lambs, get back to the ship before whoever owns this comes home. And the captain said no. He wanted to wait in the cave. He wanted to meet the owner. And to understand why, you have to understand a rule these men live by. In the Greek world, there was a sacred law called xenia, guest friendship. A stranger at your door wasn't a threat. He was sent by the gods. You took him in, you fed him, you gave him a gift to carry home. And only after all that did you dare ask his name. Break that law, you weren't answering to the stranger, you were answering to Zeus himself. The captain was counting on that gift. He had no idea the thing that lived in that cave had never heard of Zeus and wouldn't even cared about him. But then the ground began to shake. He came down off the mountain, driving his flock in front of him. A man as tall as a tree, broad as a barn, with a single round eye set in the middle of his forehead. He drove his sheep into the cave, and then he reached down, picked up a slab of rock, and rolled it across the mouth of the cave behind him. A door that 20 wagons couldn't have dragged away. And the captain and his 12 men were on the wrong side of it. The giant lit his fire, and in the light he saw them.
"Who are you?"
he said. The captain stepped forward and spoke the old words. "We're travelers, we're your guests, and the gods watch over guests." The giant laughed. Then he reached into the dark, closed one hand around two of the men, and dashed them against the floor the way you'd knock the heads off of two fish. And then he ate them, there in the firelight, bones and all, while the others stood pressed against the wall and watched. Then he stretched out among his sheep, full, and fell asleep. The captain stood there in the dark with his hand on his sword. Now, he could do it right now. Walk over, find the soft place under the ribs, drive the blade up into the sleeping heart. Easy. And then what? Then they'd all die in here, slowly, in the dark, because the only thing in the world strong enough to move that rock was the monster lying in front of them. So, the monster had to live. He waited out the longest night of his life. In the morning, the giant woke, ate 2 more of his men for breakfast, that's 4 now, 4 gone, let his flock out, rolled the rock back across the door behind them, and went off up the mountain, sealed them in, left them to wait. And while they waited, the captain found his weapon. Leaning in the cave was a great staff of olive wood, green and unseasoned as long as the mast of a ship. They cut a length of it, and they sharpened one end down to a point, and they turned that point in the fire until it was as hard as iron. Then they hid it under the dung on the floor, and they waited. Olive wood. The olive tree was the sacred tree of Athena, the goddess who loved this man, who watched his back since Troy. He was about to fight a monster with the tree's wood of his own protector. He didn't stop to pray. He just sharpened the stake. That evening, the giant came back, drove the flock in, rolled the rock shut, ate 2 more men, 6 now in total, and that's when the captain walked up to him with a wineskin. Not the watered-down stuff the men drank with dinner. This was dark, heavy wine, so strong that back home you'd cut 1 cup of it with 12 cups of water. He held it up and offered it like a guest offering his host a gift. "Here, you gave us meat, take this." The giant drank it, and his eye went wide open. He'd never tasted anything like it. He drank again. He drank a 3rd time, and warm and happy and stupid with it, he finally decided to be generous. "Tell me your name, little one," he said, "and I'll give you a guest gift of my own." The captain looked up at that single eye and said,
"My name is Nobody. My family calls me Nobody. Everyone calls me Nobody."
Now, here's a joke that's been sitting inside this story for 3,000 years, and almost everyone misses it. The Greek word he used for nobody sounds almost exactly like their word for cunning, for the kind of mind that wins by tricks instead of strength. So when he says, "My name is Nobody," what the Greeks heard underneath was, "My name is Trickster." He's telling the monster precisely what's about to happen to it, and the monster has no idea. He doesn't get the joke.
Then here is your gift, Nobody. I'll eat you last.
He then toppled over backward into sleep. They moved fast. They pulled the stake from under the dung. They held its point in the fire until it glowed, and then 5 of them lifted it, the captain leaning his whole weight on the end, and they drove it straight into that single eye. It went in like a drill bites into green wood. The eye hissed. The giant awoke with a scream that shook the entire mountain, tore the burning stake out of his face, and swung blind into the dark. But his great hands closed on nothing but air. He screamed, and the other giants of the island came running to his cave. They couldn't get in. The rock was shut, so they stood outside in the dark and shouted through it, "What's wrong? Who's hurting you? Who's killing you?" And from inside, the blind and bleeding giant roared back the truth. "Nobody! Nobody is killing me!" And the giants went quiet. And then they said, "Well, if nobody is hurting you, it must be the gods, and there's nothing we can do about that. Pray to your father. Good night." And then they went back to bed. Just sit with that for a second. He beat a giant and called off a whole tribe of giants with a single word. If watching a man fight monsters with his mind is your kind of thing, what are you doing not subscribed? Hit it and let's get him out of this cave, because getting in was easy. Getting out was the hard part. In the morning, the blind giant had to let his sheep out to feed. He pulled the rock aside just enough, sat himself down in the gap, and ran his hands across the back of every single animal as it walked past him, feeling for the men trying to ride out. So the captain went underneath. He lashed his men beneath the bellies of the big woolly rams, 3 sheep to a man, hidden in the wool against their stomachs. And himself he tied under the belly of the largest ram of the flock, hanging on with his fingers buried in that thick coat. The giant's hands passed over wool, over warm backs, feeling, and felt nothing underneath. One by one, the rams walked out into the morning sun, and one by one, clinging to their bellies, the men walked out with them. They cut the sheep loose, drove them down to the ship, and rowed for open water as hard as their arms would pull. And here, right here, the captain should have kept his mouth shut. Any sane man would have. They were alive, they were free. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to slip away across the water and never look back. But he'd just done the greatest thing of his life, and not one living soul that was not on that ship would ever know it was him. He couldn't stand it. He stood up in the stern of the ship, cupped his hands around his mouth, and shouted a taunt back at the shore. The giant heard it, tore the top off a hill and threw it, and the rock came down so close it nearly capsized the ship. The men threw themselves against the oars. They begged him, "Sit down, say nothing. You'll bring the whole mountain down on us." He couldn't. He needed the monster to know. He needed his name in that creature's ruined head forever. So he gave away the one thing that had kept all of them alive, his secret. And he shouted it across the water for the whole world to hear.
If anyone ever asks who blinded you, tell them it was Odysseus. Odysseus, son of Laertes, the man who took Troy, the Lord of Ithaca.
Odysseus. That was his name. And saying it out loud was the most expensive mistake he would ever make. Because the giant had a name too, Polyphemus. And Polyphemus had a father. His father was Poseidon, god of the sea, lord of every wave between that island and home. And the blind giant turned his ruined face to the sea and lifted his hands and prayed,
Hear me, father. If that man is fated to reach his home, let him come late. Let him come broken.
Let him come alone with every last one of his men dead behind him, and let him find his house full of strangers eating his bread. And out under the waves, his father heard him, every word. The trick that saved his life was a false name. The thing that destroyed it was his real one. He had beaten the monster in the cave. He would spend the next 10 years learning he could not beat the one inside himself. The island sank behind them. His men were cheering, slapping his back, alive. And the captain stood at the stern with his own name still warm in his mouth, and far out past the bow, in water that went down and down forever, a god was listening. If you know someone who could never let it go, who always had to have the last word, even when silence would have saved them, send them this video. The story on your screen right now is one of my favorites. A god once caught every storm in the world and tied them into a single bag, then handed it over as a guaranteed way home. All Odysseus had to do was to leave it shut. The story of what happened next is on your screen. Click it now, and I'll see you in the next story.